There exists a signal within you that most never recognize until it becomes unbearable. It arrives not as clarity, but as a profound disorientation, a sense that everything you once knew about yourself has begun to dissolve without permission. You feel it in the quiet moments, in the strange emptiness that follows your daily routines, in the sudden inability to care about things that once defined your entire existence. This is not depression. This is not failure. This is your soul preparing to cross a threshold that only reveals itself to those willing to stand in the unknown long enough to see what emerges from the darkness. What you are experiencing has a name in the language of depth psychology. Carl Jung called it the threshold of individuation, the moment when your psyche begins dismantling its familiar structures to make room for something far more authentic. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that something profoundly right is beginning to unfold. Your inner world is reorganizing itself at a level so deep that your conscious mind can only perceive it as chaos. But chaos, in the alchemical tradition Jung studied so deeply, is the prima materia, the raw substance from which transformation becomes possible. The paradox cuts to the bone. The closer you come to a genuine evolution of consciousness, the more intense the sensation of being lost becomes. You expected growth to feel like expansion, like light breaking through clouds. Instead, it feels like contraction, like standing in a narrow passage with no clear exit. This is because true transformation does not add layers to who you are, it strips them away. Every false identity, every borrowed belief, every role you perform to earn love or approval must fall before your essential nature can reveal itself. The ego, which has governed your inner world for so long, begins to sense that it will no longer occupy the center. It resists. It creates fear, confusion, doubt. It whispers that you are regressing, that you have lost your way. But the truth is simpler and more mysterious. You are not lost. You are being found. When nothing in your life makes sense anymore, pay attention. Not because you have made some terrible mistake, but because the old map no longer corresponds to the territory you now inhabit. The frameworks that once organized your reality, the narratives that gave meaning to your days, the goals that pulled you forward, all of these begin to feel hollow. You reach for them and find they no longer hold weight. This is not emptiness in the destructive sense. This is space being created within your psyche, room for a new structure to emerge, one that aligns not with external expectations, but with the deeper truth of who you actually are. Jung understood this as the necessary dissolution that precedes integration. The personality cannot expand into wholeness if it clings to its current shape. You may find yourself revisiting memories you thought you had resolved, emotions you believed you had processed. They return not to haunt you, but to be seen differently. Your psyche, in its quiet intelligence, knows that certain experiences need to be reintegrated from a new vantage point. What you once interpreted as trauma may reveal itself as initiation. What you once saw as failure may show itself as protection. The past does not change, but your relationship to it transforms entirely. This is how the soul prepares itself to ascend. It does not leave anything behind. It takes everything with it, but in a new configuration, one that no longer binds you to suffering. There is a specific discomfort that accompanies this threshold, one that is difficult to name. You feel as though you no longer fit inside your own life. The routines that once gave you stability now feel like costumes that no longer suit you. The people you love may begin to feel distant, not because love has faded, but because you are operating from a frequency they cannot yet perceive. This is not alienation. This is differentiation. You are becoming distinct, not separate. The difference matters. Separation breeds loneliness. Distinction breeds presence. Before any true elevation of consciousness can occur, there is an unavoidable encounter with what Jung called the shadow. This is the repository of everything you have rejected about yourself, every desire you deemed unacceptable, every emotion you learn to suppress, every truth you were too afraid to speak. The shadow does not emerge to punish you. It surfaces because your psyche knows that wholeness cannot be achieved through exclusion. You cannot ascend by pretending half of yourself does not exist. The material you have kept in darkness begins to press against the surface of your awareness, demanding recognition. You may find yourself feeling anger you thought you had transcended, jealousy you believed you had overcome, desires you were certain you had outgrown. Do not turn away. These are not signs of regression. They are invitations to integration. Jung was explicit about this process. He wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the gatekeeper of your evolution. It holds the energy you have been spending to keep certain parts of yourself hidden. When you stop fighting the shadow, when you turn toward it with curiosity instead of judgment, something alchemical occurs. The energy that was locked in repression becomes available for transformation. What you feared in yourself begins to reveal its hidden gifts. The rage you suppressed may hold the boundary-setting power you have always needed. The vulnerability you hid may contain the intimacy you have been seeking. The parts of yourself you exiled do not need to be destroyed. They need to be welcomed home. This confrontation with the shadow often intensifies just as you approach a higher level of consciousness. It is as though your psyche deliberately brings forward everything unresolved before allowing you to cross into a new phase of being. If you resist this process, if you continue to project your darkness onto others or deny its existence within yourself, the transformation stalls. The soul cannot move forward while dragging the weight of what it refuses to see. But when you face the shadow directly, when you acknowledge its presence without collapsing into it, something remarkable happens. The polarity dissolves. You are no longer divided between light and dark, acceptable and unacceptable, good and bad. You become whole. And wholeness, not perfection, is what the individuation process seeks. At this stage of transformation, the world around you begins to respond differently. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by linear causality. You may find that the exact book you needed appears in your path, that a conversation with a stranger addresses the precise question you have been holding, that events align in ways that feel almost orchestrated. This is not magic, this is resonance. When your inner world begins to reorganize around a deeper truth, the outer world mirrors that movement. The psyche and the cosmos are not separate systems, they are interwoven. As your consciousness shifts, reality itself seems to shift with you. These synchronistic events are not random, they are the language through which the self, the central organizing principle of your psyche, communicates with your conscious awareness. The self knows the direction of your evolution even when your ego does not. It places signs along your path, not to give you answers, but to confirm that you are moving in alignment with your deeper nature. Pay attention to what repeats. Notice the symbols that appear in your dreams and then again in waking life. Listen to the subtle pull towards certain people, places, ideas. These are not distractions, they are guidance. There is a difference between what you want and what you are being called toward. Desire often arises from the ego's need to fill a perceived lack. The call of the self arises from a completeness seeking expression. When synchronicity occurs, it does not necessarily grant your wishes. It reveals your path. Sometimes this path leads away from what you thought you wanted and towards something you did not know you needed. The discomfort of this redirection is real, but so is the truth it carries. Your soul is not interested in comfort. It is interested in becoming what it was always meant to be. As your transformation deepens, you will notice a shift in your relationship to solitude. There is a pull inward, not born of sadness or withdrawal, but of necessity. Your psyche needs space to reorganize. The constant stimulation of social interaction, the noise of external demands, the performance required to maintain certain relationships, all of this begins to feel intolerable. This is not misanthropy. This is the self calling you home to yourself. In the silence away from the projections and expectations of others, you can finally hear the voice that has been speaking beneath the noise all along. It is your own voice, but deeper, wiser, more ancient than your personal history. It knows things your conscious mind has forgotten. It remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. Alongside this need for solitude comes an increasing intolerance for the superficial. Conversations that once seemed pleasant now feel exhausting. Small talk becomes unbearable. Relationships that operate on autopilot, that never venture beneath the surface, begin to feel like prisons. This is not arrogance, this is discernment. Your consciousness is shifting, and with it, your capacity to engage with anything that does not carry depth or authenticity diminishes. You are no longer willing to waste your energy on dynamics that do not nourish your soul. This may create distance between you and certain people. It may end relationships you once believed were permanent. This is painful, but it is also necessary. Not everyone is meant to accompany you into the next phase of your becoming. At the same time, your intuition sharpens to an almost unsettling degree. You begin to know things without understanding how you know them. You sense undercurrents in situations that others miss. You perceive the unspoken truths beneath what people say. This is not paranoia. This is the result of your consciousness expanding beyond the limits of rational thought. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of archetypal knowledge that exists beneath individual awareness. As you individuate, your access to this deeper layer of psyche increases. You tap into a wisdom that does not belong to you personally, but to the human species as a whole. Trust these intuitions. They are not random. They are messages from the deeper layers of your being, guiding you through the transformation. But here is where many falter. The self calls and the ego resists. You feel the pull toward change, but you also feel the terror of releasing what is familiar. So you hesitate. You rationalize. You distract yourself. You convince yourself that the discomfort will pass if you just hold on a little longer. But the self does not negotiate. It does not retreat because you are afraid. If anything, the pressure increases. The situations in your life that are no longer aligned with your deeper truth begin to crumble. Relationships fracture. Jobs lose their meaning. Health issues arise. These are not punishment. They are communications. Your soul is creating discomfort in the areas of your life that no longer serve your evolution, forcing you to either change or suffer indefinitely. The choice has always been yours, but the longer you resist, the more intense the call becomes. What you are approaching, though you may not yet see it clearly, is a death. Not a literal death, but a symbolic one. Every genuine transformation requires the end of something. An old version of yourself must die before a new one can be born. This is the universal pattern found in every myth, every spiritual tradition, every depth psychological framework. The hero must descend into the underworld. The initiate must pass through the trial. The soul must endure the dark night before the dawn. You are in that passage now. The structures that once held your identity together are dissolving. The beliefs that gave your life shape are collapsing. The roles you played so convincingly no longer feel authentic. This feels like loss because, in a sense, it is. But it is not the loss of who you are. It is the loss of who you were pretending to be. Jung called this the death of the ego, and he was careful to specify that it is not a literal annihilation, but a restructuring. The ego does not disappear. It simply ceases to be the center of your psyche. It steps aside, allowing the self to take its rightful place as the organizing principle of your inner world. This shift is terrifying for the ego, which has spent your entire life believing it was in control. It fights to maintain its dominance. It creates fear, doubt, confusion. It tells you that you are losing yourself, that you are falling apart, that you are failing. But the truth is the opposite. You are not falling apart. You are coming together in a way you never have before. The fragments of yourself that have been scattered across false identities, unmet expectations, and inherited narratives are being gathered and integrated into a coherent whole. This period of symbolic death often manifests as a profound sense of meaninglessness. Nothing feels important anymore. The goals you once pursued seem irrelevant. The achievements you worked so hard for no longer bring satisfaction. This is not nihilism, this is clarity. Your psyche is stripping away everything that does not belong to your essential nature. The motivation you once derived from external validation, from proving your worth, from meeting others' expectations, all of this falls away. What remains is a raw, unadorned presence. A self that exists independent of performance or approval. It is uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. You have spent so long defining yourself through what you do, what you achieve, what others think of you. Now you are being asked to exist without any of those supports, to simply be, without justification or explanation. In this liminal space, time takes on a strange quality. Days pass, but you cannot say what you did with them. You move through your routines mechanically, but you are not fully present. This is the desert of the soul, the place where nothing grows, where no guidance comes, where you are left alone with the silence. It is tempting to fill this void with distractions, to manufacture meaning through new projects or relationships. But if you do, you will miss the transformation. The desert is not a punishment, it is a crucible. It is where the old self is burned away so that the new self can emerge from the ashes. There is no rushing this process, there is no bypassing it. You must allow yourself to be an unknown, to sit with the discomfort, to trust that something is happening beneath the surface even when you cannot see it. What sustains you through this threshold is not hope or faith in the conventional sense. It is trust in the archetypal process itself. Humanity has been undergoing these transformations for millennia. Every culture has its myths of death and rebirth, its rituals of initiation, its stories of descent and return. You are not alone in this. You are participating in a pattern older than civilization, a pattern woven into the structure of consciousness itself. Your ancestors walked this path. The mystics and the poets and the seekers all passed through this same dark passage, and they emerged, not unscathed but whole, not the same but more themselves than they had ever been. The final stage before the transformation completes is surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of control. You stop trying to force the process. You stop resisting the dissolution. You stop clinging to the remnants of your old identity. You let go. This is perhaps the most difficult moment of all, because the ego interprets surrender as death. But surrender is not death, it is birth. When you finally release your grip, when you stop fighting what is happening to you and allow yourself to be carried by the current of your own becoming, the transformation accelerates. What was fragmented begins to cohere. What was chaotic begins to clarify. What was painful begins to reveal its purpose. And then, quietly, without fanfare or epiphany, you realize something has shifted. You cannot pinpoint the exact moment it happened. There was no lightning bolt, no sudden illumination, but you are different. You respond to situations in ways you never would have before. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to explain yourself. The opinions of others, which once held so much power over you, now feel distant, irrelevant. You are no longer looking outside yourself for validation or direction. You have found your center, and it is stable in a way nothing external ever was. Your presence changes. People notice it, though they may not understand what they are noticing. You carry a stillness that does not come from suppression or effort. It is the natural stillness of someone who has integrated their depths, who no longer carries the burden of unacknowledged shadows or unmet longings. You are no longer performing your life. You are living it, and that makes all the difference. Relationships reconfigure themselves around this new frequency. Some people, unable to meet you at this level, drift away. This is not a judgment of them. It is simply a recognition that your paths have diverged. Others, those who are also walking their own journey of transformation, move closer. New connections form, aligned not with who you were, but with who you are becoming. These relationships feel different. There is less pretense, less negotiation, less need to manage impressions. There is simply presence, recognition, a shared understanding that transcends words. The solitude you once sought as an escape now becomes a natural state. You are no longer alone because you are afraid of connection. You are alone because it is where your soul breathes most freely. The need to fill every silence, to avoid every moment of emptiness dissolves. You recognize that the void is not something to fear or fix. It is the space from which all creation arises. It is the silence that holds all sound. It is the emptiness that contains all fullness. You no longer run from it. You rest in it, and in that rest you understand something fundamental. Your soul did not transform to impress anyone, to achieve some external standard of success, to become a better version of what others expected. It transformed to return to its own truth, to shed the layers of conditioning and trauma and false identity that obscured its essential nature. You have not become someone new. You have remembered who you always were beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the endless striving to be something other than yourself. This is the homecoming, not a destination you traveled toward, but a recognition of where you have been standing all along. If you are listening to this and recognizing your own journey in these words, then you are already in the process of transformation. The transformation is not something you need to seek or force. It is already happening. Your task is not to control it, but to allow it, to stop resisting the dissolution, to trust the intelligence of your own psyche. The signal has been given, the threshold is here, and though the path forward is not visible, though the darkness feels absolute, you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to continue this exploration of depth and transformation. Share in the comments what sign you have been ignoring, what part of yourself is calling to be seen. Your journey is unique, but it is not solitary. Others walk this path with you, seeking the same truth, navigating the same shadows, emerging into the same light that has always been waiting within.